Hello and welcome to this edition of AI Made Real, where we talk about with a lot of senior business leaders and analytics leaders on their journeys and their experiences of how they have kind of driven success in their respective organizations. And today, it's a pleasure that I have with me one of my very dear friends and a client and a colleague in on different ways, Rod Bates, who's the VP of Data Insights and Analytics at Insight Global. Rod, welcome.
Thanks, Amaresh. It's great to be with you today. Thanks
Yes,
for
as always, as always. So, Rod, I mean, I know you, I mean, I obviously know you very well, but what will be really interesting is if you can just give a little bit of introduction about kind of yours, but a little bit of the career journey, because it's not like you didn't jump into this field in like last 5 years when it became
yeah,
hot. You were always in this thing. So it'll be
yeah,
really interesting to kind of thread that journey a little bit.
yeah. No, happy to do that. It's always fun to share and to hear as well because lots of analytics leaders came to this role in different ways, right? And
Yeah.
lots of success stories and different paths to get here. Mine is somewhat unique in the sense that I've always done this, right? There's some gray in the temples. So I've obviously been doing this for a while, but it's been sort of my entire career has been in analytics. And I was fortunate enough to kind of do graduate studies in math and statistics and some computer science along the way, and within the business school, and right at the time when analytics as a field is really sort of emerging. And I came out of grad school and kind of jumped right into it as it was really taking off, and have been in it ever since. I started in technology. I was with Intel Corporation, and doing statistics for them, and sort of really started there. Worked my way into across different industries. I was with FedEx for a while, Coca-Cola, Epsilon Marketing, PwC, and have really been fortunate to in the last couple of years to have landed at Insight Global, which is a privately held staffing company, fast-growing staffing company here in Atlanta. So lots of different verticals, lots of different opportunities to apply the field of analytics, AI, and data to driving business impact.
And more importantly, you started with where you can still do a design of experiments, I think, on paper.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I remember a little bit of that. That was a long time ago, but yeah, I started in applied statistics, and design of experiments was one of the things I specialized in. Yeah.
You just mentioned Intel, and Intel obviously, that's probably most of the Intel stuff is probably design of
Yeah,
experiments.
that's right. Yeah.
So Inside Global, I mean, tell us a little bit more about Inside Global and kind of how is the role of the data insights and analytics leadership and kind of role set up?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, very fortunate to have landed at Insight Global. I mean, I'll talk about the industry first. I mean, the staffing industry is super rich and sort of ripe for the application of what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Analytics, data, now AI more and more. Really, there's just so much value to be harvested in this industry vertical that's staffing, from our field, right? And so that's great. And it's always I had an old mentor that told me once, like, hey, find a really good industry and find a really good player
Yeah.
in that really good industry, and to go 2 for 2 on that is really fulfilling. I mean, Insight Global, again, privately held, led by a group of people that have been here for a long time and really know how to run a staffing business. And when I started talking to them, we're like, hey, we know we could be doing more with analytics and driving even more value from analytics. And just exciting to come in and do that. And really an organization with a strong purpose. We lead with our purpose being to develop our people personally, professionally, and financially, so they can be the light to the world around them. And to just have that really strong purpose in something that's our North Star and our guiding light for everything we do. And it just helps sort of me to sort of put together a roadmap for, okay, how do we use analytics, data, and AI to accelerate and to help support that purpose? And as I mentioned, it's actually really fulfilling and rewarding to be able to do that when you're helping, connect people with careers and with jobs and with good work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know, I mean, this is not the you've done the same template or multiple times, and you call it the value-based data transformation, right?
Yeah,
And I know like the journey you started kind of the in some ways it was in its infancy where you kind of started where in Insight Global when you kind of came in and started that journey.
yeah,
So and you're very passionate about it. So tell me, when you say value-based data transformation, what does it mean? Like, how do you define
yeah, yeah. And I'll start with sort of really acknowledging, I wasn't always so passionate and focused about it, right? It took me some seasoning to realize, wow, especially as you advance, into leadership roles, the importance of having that perspective. But it's only natural too when you start, and I still, sort of mentor and coach people through this phase of their careers. It's only natural to sort of, again, hey, I'm good at analytics, I'm good at AI, I'm good at data science, and you sort of have that hammer that you're always going around looking for a nail.
it?
And I was that guy too, right? I
Yeah,
mean, I was that guy that was like, hey, what's the application of this sort of machine learning algorithm, right? And I've got the algorithm, got the capability. I'm looking for the application, and I think really the evolution of that for me was starting to realize like that's great, but when I'm talking to executives and yeah, they're suitably impressed by my knowledge, but they're even more impressed when I can talk about, well, how am I going to drive value from it, right?
mm,
And so, yeah, I started thinking and talking about with folks like you and, colleagues and peers about, wow, I really want to be more of a value, business value and business impact driven analytics leader. And, what does that mean? And we all talk about, and I think in theory, it's very natural to say,
yeah.
let's be use case driven.
Yes, exactly.
Let's start with use cases and where does the business sort of face the most challenges where this capability can help, right? And the technology would follow from that, right? Whatever the
Right.
technology is, whether it's the tools that you're using or, the machine learning algorithms, as I mentioned, or whatever that technology is, really should follow. And like I say, we've had great success already in the 2 years I've been at Insight Global in identifying those. And in theory, it's very natural to say, yeah, start there and don't let the technology be the driver, but let the use cases be the driver. And that's really, what I try to stay focused on and what I mean when I talk about a value-based data and analytics transformation.
And so give an example and just make it real.
Yeah. I mean, in the staffing industry, we're always thinking about like, you know, how do we make, as I said, our purpose is to make our people, helping them develop, personally, professionally, financially. The professional and financial part of it is something that's right at the heart of what we do.
Right.
I mean, when we think about creating, opportunities for our recruiters, for our account managers, it's about giving them good, sales territories.
Mm,
What is the opportunity for an account manager? What is an opportunity for a recruiter with the candidates that we help them sort of identify they're going to be good matches for job openings? Again, that is such a rich field for what we do, right? For data and analytics. And so that's when we go in and we say, wow, that's good for everyone. That's good for individuals in our company. That's good for the company. That's good for my organization because it's really fulfilling for us. So just being very use case forward in that thinking about, whatever we're using. Sometimes we're just using dashboards,
mm,
right?
right.
Sometimes we're just using dashboards to bring that value to life. Sometimes it's a combination of dashboards and a predictive model and the adoption of the analytics and sort of and the data assets that drive it and turning it into production. All those things put it together is really what drives the value. And we don't fall in love with one particular piece of technology,
Right.
particular, data warehousing solution or, data science tool, but like, how does it all come together to deliver that value?
And I mean, so let's say kind of the sales territory example that you just did. So how do you like stitch it together? Because you talked about adoption, you talked about tools, you talked about a bunch of things. How do you think about stitching the whole thing together?
I mean, it really starts with making sure you understand what the business, what the business needs. And even before that, like what is our business model? How does our business work? Inside of the industry we're in, but then how do we play in that industry? Um, and and so it really starts with good interpretation of what the business problem is, right? And then thinking about what is the data that we have available? What data do we need to acquire? What tools do we need to bring sort of into that? But it's always under that umbrella of the business problem, that we're trying to solve, and bringing your business partners along with you from the very beginning.
Hmm.
I like to say start together, stay together, right? I mean,
Right.
really telling them from the very beginning, like the problem that you're out to help them to solve, um, and iterating through it with them and being super honest with them from the very beginning, like, if it's a predictive model, it's not going to be 100%
Right.
accurate from the beginning, and we're going to make this better together as we go.
Right. And but what's the trade-off? So yes, you can go and do that. How do you make sure? I mean, how do you kind of the risk is this could be a bunch of one-offs. Yeah, you've
Yeah,
solved a problem one, you have one dashboard, no one
yeah,
uses. I mean, there's like I mean the industry is littered with that. So
yeah,
how like where's the technology comes in which actually allows it to be scalable, and how do you do the next one faster and the next one even
yeah.
faster?
Love that question. Yeah, I think it's um it's just like any other business decision, right, Amaresh? Like, I mean, I am trading off solving for these one or two business use cases, um, with making a technology decision that, like this whole phrase that's out there now, technical debt. I'm
Yeah.
trying to avoid technical debt. I'm trying to avoid technical debt. Actually, sometimes I'm willing to take on some in my job. I'm willing to take on some technical debt to get to value faster. Because
Right.
if you actually run the whole business case all the way through, it was actually the right decision,
Mm.
right? And so it's no different than any other
Right.
business decision that we have to make every day, honestly, right? And sort of this aversion and some of this idea of like I've got to avoid technical debt at all costs,
Yes.
and it's like wow, that can actually take you down the wrong path sometimes. And sometimes it is the right decision to say, wow, okay, I'm going to make a good technical decision here, and
Yeah.
it's technology investment that I'm making. But really, in every case, going in and thinking about that. And look, it's not always easy,
Yes.
right? I'm not saying that there's a playbook for this or a recipe that's easy to follow, but that is the mindset I think that one must have.
And that's a very refreshing thing that you're okay to take technical debt. On the other side, I mean, I think no matter what you do, you will have technical debt. So
Yeah,
might as well might
never
as well
zero.
consciously take it rather than
Right.
unconsciously.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can never completely eliminate that debt. So
So how have you organized teams to kind of just thinking about, okay, you're saying, okay, you're going to hire technology leaders, you're going to have data science leaders, you're going to hire, I mean, I know you have hired UX, UI reporting talent, you have had integration engineering talent. Like, I mean, so how do you organize that? How do you think about organizing the team, and how do you think about their roles and kind of the mission overall? I mean, I mean, that's what's your secret there?
yeah, I mean, I think it's important to put the right groups sort of really working together for that shared vision. Um, there's always a lot of talk about, is analytics, where does analytics sit in the
Yeah.
organization? Right? Is analytics in the CIO
Yeah.
organization? Is it somewhere in the business? Is it a standalone organization? And that's an important decision, but I think more important, like you're saying, is I mean, we're being really successful as part of the CIO organization here at Insight Global. We're very, very happy to be part of that organization because we work really closely with our engineering group,
Right.
right? And so we have close alignment with our engineering group. We have close alignment with our product, with our internal product teams. And I think understanding sort of the way that we're going to market, in our case, internally with our technology solutions and making analytics really a close part of that has been a key ingredient to being successful. And then it lets you scale up and do these things like, within my organization, yeah, I mean, we have our core data strategy and data governance teams that work side by side, what's next in the data supply chain, data engineering, building out those data products, that then kind of start to get proliferated across other teams. We proliferate that across, of course, our data science team, right? Our data engineering teams building solutions and for our data science teams to use. But it's the same data assets that the BI team is using for creating dashboards and self-service data solutions. And it's the same one that our intelligent automation teams are building, RPA, data automations, these kinds of things. Now, so all of those groups are really sort of working closely together. It's a close-knit organization. And again, they understand that value transformation and driving impact. And so there's a lot of consistency there. And then again, my team's called DIA, Data Insights and Analytics. And so we're really sitting as much as any group, sort of right on, on that intersection of business and technology, right? And we'll, in one meeting, we'll be talking to someone in sales about how we're building better sales territories for them. And that's got our analytics adoption team right in the middle of it. I've got a great leader for analytics adoption that understands our business and really is helping us navigate, like, how do we make that real for a sales organization? And then I flip over and I'm talking to a director in software engineering about how our model gets productionized in our internal systems. So sitting at that frontier of business and technology really makes this a lot of fun.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you have a magic to do it. I mean, I've seen you do it multiple times, and it's something special. So there's a special rod element of bringing it all together.
Thank you.
But
Yeah.
changing gears, AI. What's your take, kind of, and where are you on IG on that journey and kind of early read? Obviously, it's very hyped up. There's a lot of things, and kind of it almost feels like for us who've been seeing the internet, it kind of feels like internet a little bit here. But kind of what's your take? Where are you and learnings, if any?
I mean, yeah, very hyped up, but I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, we are taking this very seriously, right? I mean, this truly is, I think, a moment in time where it's legitimately something that we know is going to change the way that for our industry, but overall, right? So I mean, we know that we have to take this seriously. We know that we've got to start building out capabilities that really put us in a position to leverage this technology as it evolves. It is easy to sort of get caught up in the hype, right? And maybe overinvest here or overinvest there. And we're all trying to figure out, like, where do we put our chips down, right? And this AI transformation that's underway. But it's 100% a big part of our roadmap and the way that we're thinking for I mean, now, I mean, we are leveraging, again, in our industry. It's a big part of my team's sort of value, and the way that we drive solutions is leveraging LLMs, leveraging Gen AI. I mean, I think what we're excited to see is really how this evolves in terms of, these embedded solutions that are out there in desktop software, the enterprise software. Everyone's sort of embedding these capabilities now. And it's going directly to our users, right? To our business users, and like understanding, wow, how does that fit with what we're building from more proprietary perspective, and thinking about those kinds of things, and where do we need to invest versus where is it kind of just gonna, where's it just gonna be part of it. The desktop, software for our business users. And then, of course, for us, we're thinking a lot about how do we get our data AI ready?
Right.
There was this period of time, the last, 5 years, there's a lot of talk about data self-servicing, right? And data democratization. And I think that's been great because it started to make us think more about our data, as an asset that can be molded
Right.
into the use cases. And I think now there's a lot we need to think about in terms of, how do we get our data AI ready, right?
Right.
And what does that even mean? So we'll
Right.
spend a lot of time thinking about that as well.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. You brought up a point around kind of in some ways, what is the future of how software gets written, or like what does analytics solution even mean? Like, because some of the stuff is probably already there and something what you basically kind of plug into versus what you build kind of
Yeah.
that'll be an interesting angle. And then obviously the data aspect, which is going to be absolutely critical. Uh, uh, what advice would you have for like newer analytics leaders or mid-career analytics leaders who kind of have aspiration to kind of go and run AI teams, data teams, uh, kind of from your long journey, kind of what pieces, golden
Yeah.
nuggets, guys.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the things we touched on, right? I mean, and again, in theory, it probably sounds like, yeah, of course, we should do this, but I found myself from over the years, taking my eye off the ball of really being sort of business first. And exactly what that means. And people used to say that to me, and I was like, I don't know what that means. I mean, yeah, of course I'm here, right? I'm working in the business. Um, but really, sort of having that bias for understanding how I'm going to drive impact, the partnerships that I need to build, the way that I communicate this, right? I mean, you really are the chief storyteller for what AI is,
Right.
and helping your CEO and your COO and your CFO really navigate, right? Like, okay, what's hype and what's FOMO and
Yeah.
what's real, right? And I mean, honestly, here's the investment strategy that we should be pursuing. Um, and you start building that early in your career. That muscle that you start building is by listening to what your peers, in the business, whether it's sales, it's finance, it's marketing, it's procurement, really not isolating yourself from them, but really immersing yourself with them, right? Because you start listening to the way that they talk about, their challenges, and what they're facing. And then you kind of wake up one day and you're like, wow, I kind of know everything that's going on a little bit, enough to really have those conversations about the thing that I have deep technical expertise in.
Right.
So that's analytics and AI and data, but I've been having a high level of awareness about what's going on around me to be able to impact change there.
What about all the things, because the space on the technology side, part of it is kind of people take the eye off the ball of that is the technology side changes so frequently and so fast.
Yeah.
So how have you over the years kind of kept up, right? I mean, because how you build models now versus then was completely different. So like that, what's your trick for that?
Yeah, I love really, I mean, sort of just being a heavy consumer of what's going on out there, whether, and everyone's got to sort of find their favorite channel for doing that, whether it's podcast,
Yeah.
uh, still trying to keep up with, university partnerships. I love doing both sort of as a service to the universities, but also, understanding sort of in academics what's being talked about. And often, especially in our field, even the business schools, they're 2 or 3 years ahead
Right.
uh, with the curve in terms of like what's really going to be impacting and what's coming down the pipe. Um, and just being super active with industry groups, attending conferences. I mean, all the usual suspects, but it's not any one thing. It's putting it
Yeah.
all together. And it's building your own judgment for wherever you are at that time is like, what's relevant for us right now,
Right.
right? You go to these conferences, I've talked about this, and people are talking about, what choice of this BI tool or what choice of this, data engineering tool should I be using? And those are important. Um, but math has been the same for a long, long time, right? And understanding how we're going to apply what we're good at. And technology will evolve and come and go. And, falling in love with one particular platform or one particular tool is really something I exercise caution and encourage others to do as well. And the fundamental principles are really what's going to endure.
Absolutely. And so, Rod, I mean, always very refreshing to kind of chat with you. It's like always uh, very foundational building blocks kind of an approach about kind of how you have always approached your roles and kind of on the value piece of it. So thank you for coming and sharing some of the learnings and stories and ideas there. I'm pretty sure it'll be very useful for everyone else, especially now where the technology hype is at a completely different level, right? So kind of bringing it back and kind of focusing, I think it'll serve well for many people. So thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
AuxoAI. What if? What's next?